We're good. All right, everyone. Welcome to the June 22nd instance of the Service Mesh Interface Community Call. This call is governed by the CNCF Code of Conduct. If you've got questions about what that is or what is inside of it, details are on the CNCF website. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can all take a look at the agenda. Bridget, looks like you're a host and you currently have disabled screen sharing.
Oh, sorry about that. I feel like there we go. You should be able to now. I think the defaults change constantly.
Yeah, I know that feeling. All right, can everybody see my screen? All right, yep. Awesome. First, welcome everybody to the call. And we've got a couple of discussion items here on our agenda today. The first one is, I've already got it put up here, is this Gateway API exploration document. Big thanks to John, who I think just joined the call recently, for helping to put this all together. This document is essentially a high level, well, not just high level, it gets pretty deep. It's a discussion on an exploration of ways that Gateway API can be utilized for east-west traffic. So one thing that we've been looking into a lot on the SMI side is different ways that we can maybe utilize the Gateway API to describe traffic routing. And so this document, it kind of digs into practical ways that we could be doing that and some of the trade-offs associated with different approaches. I believe there are three high-level approaches that have been discussed with examples from different meshes and mesh products and some of the considerations that need to be taken into account there. There is quite a bit of comments on the document with various different issues. So I'd encourage anybody here or anybody watching the call on the future, watching this recording, to take a look and put any comments or thoughts that you have in the document. But I will pause here and ask if anybody, let anybody ask questions or talk about things that they might want to hash out in a synchronous manner.
I have not had a chance to read through all of this yet, but this looks awesome. I'm really excited to see this start coming together, and I will definitely take some time in the next week or so to start digging into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Google Docs comments aren't your preferred method of discussion, or if you've got bigger questions that you want to ask and talk through in an asynchronous way, we also have the SMI Slack channel. We've been blanking on his name. Rob has said we're more than welcome to discuss things in the Gateway API Slack channel as well. So we've got a couple of different ways we can go about discussing and hashing a lot of this out. So really grateful for that. Any last questions before we move on to our next agenda item?
I wanted to point out that Nick Jackson opened an issue about deprecating traffic routes in favor of supporting Kubernetes Gateway API. I'll drop a link in the discussion items here. But yeah, I wonder if Nick, if you have specific thoughts around both that issue you had opened and this overall doc. I feel like you put a lot of time into thinking about this already, so I'm interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. So, I mean, my ultimate motivation around anything is that if there is to be something which is useful for the community, what we need is a standard, and that standard should be, well, a true standard which is hopefully adopted by all participants, both vendors and consumers of users in the community. And my kind of feeling around the sort of the gravitas towards things like API Gateway is that what we need to do is add momentum to that, as opposed to sort of creating like an alternate sort of approach or which could cause confusion. Now, when I kind of looked at tried to do a kind of a very quick high level comparison between like SMI and sort of the API network gateway, or like X networking as it was back then, I believe there was like definite possibility that this can be made to work. There were differences which would mean it wouldn't necessarily be a sort of a sort of a straightforward conversion, but I definitely think it's something which is possible, and something is sort of I believe is quite strongly is something that we should do, because it's just it's for the good of the community to try and keep things focused, and even kind of like pushing things further around that, which is like I've kind of got a good belief that there should be can we put focus into changing API gateway and helping to shape that to formulate a singular specification that's potentially suitable for service mesh across the board. So yeah, that was kind of like my intention and my rationale around creating that intention. It was kind of just like some ideas to try and garner some thoughts and opinion.
If people are not aware, the Gateway API is looking to do a beta release in 1 to 3 weeks, probably not the 4th of July week, but possibly the week before or after. And at that point, there's going to be some publicity around it. From Istio's perspective, we'll announce that to make more noise around the fact that we have had an implementation before. It's not finished and not correct, as John will talk to that as well. I think it's addressed in this document. But we're very keen to see that, as Nick said, is to see the community of people come forward in taking sort of the step up to now with the Gateway API has very much been focused on the ingress north-south implementation. And there is a point at which we could come through and announce, all right, well, we're now looking to finalize the use cases for the east-west implementation and share early thinkings like this. Definitely not saying there's any final implementations being done, but directionally from everyone, like if we can get the community behind this and have a strong announcement, I think that would be a really good coordinated time to do it.
Yeah. Sorry, Lou, I just saw you go off mute.
Oh, no, did I? Sorry, I must have fat fingered my mouse somehow. I was just stretching.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that sounds good. It's really encouraging to hear that from the Istio side. And like I think I mentioned beforehand, we've been tossing around different ways of a potential implementation for the traffic part of it. And so I think the second thing that I think we're looking for from a mesh use case perspective is policy, because that's something that's kind of absent from Gateway API at the moment. There's not really anything for authorization policy or retries, timeouts that I've seen. Maybe I've missed a couple of things. But I saw there is a gateway enhancement proposal accepted, I think 713, around policy attachment. And I don't know what the current status of that is, but that's something that I'd like to see expand, or maybe that's where SMI could work with Gateway API to kind of help flesh out some of those policy use cases and the mechanisms by which we can accomplish some of the more common mesh policy use cases.
Yeah, if you look at the Gateway API, right, a fair amount of effort has already been put in and standardized around like the patterns for doing policy attachment to resource types within the model. And those patterns also work for things that were not explicitly designed with Gateway in mind from the beginning. Like, an obvious one to attach a policy might be service. There are some things that policies should attach to which are not necessarily networking oriented, but are more endpoint oriented, like workloads. Specifically auth-z, which we'll probably want to get into the weeds about the pros and cons of certain attachment mechanisms. But John, correct me if I'm wrong, but the pattern for policy attachment to resource, to like top level resource, is pretty well established now, right? That's settled case law, I think, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, in the proposal, there was like some initial design about how it should work for meshes, which was kind of half-baked because there was no support for meshes otherwise, so it's all kind of hypothetical. So I'd have to go double check. We may need to fine tune that, but otherwise, in general, yes. Yeah, one thing I think, I mean, I definitely think we want those type of policies in Gateway API at some point, and it could be this group of people that pushes forward on that, but I don't think this should be a mesh thing. Like timeouts apply to, timeouts off everything we mentioned, and really having trouble thinking of something that only applies to mesh and not to Ingress as well. So,
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't think these are patterns which are specific to mesh, and I don't think the configuration is specific. I think the only difference is that the mesh is the enabler, but to the end user, I think the fact that there is a transparent specification actually is really, really beneficial. What actually does the underlying implementation of the pattern to me is really powerful, that I don't necessarily need to concern myself about it. Can I float one potentially controversial idea? Well, I say controversial, but like in order to kind of drive things forward, what would be the consideration around deprecating SMI and literally just going full in and putting all weight, all intelligence, and all support around SIG network to drive this forward and really kind of get things shifted?
Yeah, it's definitely an idea. I think maybe what Keith was just saying about not everything fits neatly into the bucket of Gateway API. Certainly SIG network is the realm we want to be in, though I think SIG network also hasn't necessarily wanted to go near meshes in the past. So there's complexity there, of course. But in terms of scoped exactly to the traffic stuff, I think we are all pretty much agreeing on this, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I think to Bridget's point, there are some, like I need to dig into the policy story a bit more. It sounds like I may have missed some of the detail since the last time I took a look at it. But yeah, I think that, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, what I was going to say is just I'm going to take a look at it and see, and of course, we need to talk to other SMI maintainers and things like that. But I don't. Yeah, I think I agree with Bridget, where I don't disagree that SIG network is the greater body that we like to be a part of as far as focusing on this work. Whether or not that's specifically Gateway API. For me personally, even the naming is a little interesting to wrap my head around as well. Okay, I'm configuring my mesh with a gateway resource. So there's some questions there, but I certainly think the direction moving towards SIG networking has a lot of promise. Yeah,
because I think, like from a policy perspective as well, I completely appreciate it. But I've spoken to a few of you in the past around sort of the concept of policy. But again, to me, policy is service mesh is an enabler. Policy is not necessarily a specific facet of service mesh. You could have policy, which is like a load balancer. So therefore, you could have an API gateway configuration, which actually drives an internal load balancer or an internal subnet routing configuration, lower level networking. Again, that like the implementation of how it functions is to the end user quite nice that they would deal with this kind of high level common specification. So I also wonder about policy and how and if there is appetite to kind of have those discussions, and then again we can keep things moving forward and pushing towards a commonality of a singular spec.
Yeah, I just saw, to that point, I just saw Craig's message in the chat that there's room for working group mesh under SIG network. There's already a working group policy. I think that sounds really good to me. But as far as the reach and the governance, I think that makes sense as a natural extension of the work that SMI has accomplished thus far and is looking to do in the future. Yeah. Any other thoughts around that?
So I mean, if we consider the API surfaces today, right? I mean, I think we're all clearly in agreement that anything traffic management oriented probably belongs in something under SIG network, right? And gateway is carrying that load today. I mean, we can probably ignore the branding and the naming. Naming is hard. People wanted to call gateway 19 other things, and the bike shedding on it was pretty epic. We know that things like authorization and authentication policy have equal use in ingress and egress gateways, and not just mesh, the use case. So it seems like there's a natural home there. Of the things that remain, right, you have telemetry control, which it's not clear that that needs to be standardized, right? There are pros and cons in standardizing that. Open telemetry and open metrics have come on leaps and bounds in the last 3 years, but it was certainly really hard to target anything in that domain. And actually still is kind of difficult because of vendor diversity and solution diversity. And then the other kind of big remaining thing is contextualization. Right. The one thing about ingress and egress gateways is, I have a route points to a service, and so I know exactly what I'm talking to. In mesh, right, you just get stuck into a workload and you have no idea what it's talking to unless somebody configures it, right? So that the inbound and outbound dependencies of any workload in the mesh. And that's the resource that tends to be mesh specific, right? Is that contextualization resource. And I think that's right between those, like SMI also has that API surface for let me read telemetry. I don't know if that really is going to survive. Like open telemetry and open metrics and Prometheus are really the nexus of thought leadership in that space anyway, and it would probably be really hard to drive a standard for that. So the telemetry resource is more about declaring where the telemetry goes, what telemetry is recorded, things of that nature. Which I don't think the SMI spec actually says a lot about today. It says, yes,
Yeah.
I think I'm remembering that right.
Oh, I think you're totally right on. You're totally right on open telemetry being the standard, but some of us probably remember the open census versus open tracing. Oh no! And then you know what? OTel is coming together. Everything is great. I think that's the right sort of direction.
Yeah, well, I think my point there is trying to drive a standard right now is actually premature.
Sure.
Yeah. All the conversations I've ever had with people trying to use telemetry with mesh have all been implementation and solution specific.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. When you've got something like OTel is great, but it's still, from what I've seen, relatively new as far as people experimenting and actually implementing the spec. I want to go back for a second to that contextualization resource just to make sure I understand what it is you're referring to there. So you're talking about when you've got your proxy or whatever it is, whether your sidecar list, whatever, you've got this proxy next to a resource. Is the contextualization you're referring to the contextualization of what is the identity of this resource that traffic's going to? Or is it?
No, well, not the identity, right? So if I'm in a cluster and I have 10,000 services, right, and you bring up a sidecar and then you tell it, here are the 10,000 services that this workload may talk to.
Okay, yeah.
The sidecar is going to fall over.
Yeah.
Real hard.
Right, yeah.
And so there's kind of different ways to do contextualization. Like you can have each thing declare, here are all the things that I use. Or you can tell people, here are all the things who use me, right? You can kind of do the producer consumer viewpoint of it. Usually people like to declare their dependencies. And that's usually considered a better security practice because it's easier to audit. But that's one of the biggest problems in mesh is that form of contextualization. Right? You can try to solve it with dynamism, but that doesn't always work. And so you run into these kinds of issues. That problem is unique to mesh. That doesn't exist in ingress and it doesn't exist in egress.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I haven't heard that under the head of contextualization before. But yeah, that makes total sense. That is a mesh specific concern. yeah, it'd be interesting to figure out what that API service would look like in a gateway API compliant world, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, John and I threw around like way back in some iteration of some document result reviewing the gateway API. We threw around some examples of this. John, do you like one example was that like you could have a gateway resource and it could just directly reference services, and that would be one way to declare dependencies. And you can also do things like if you have Auth-Z policies, then you could do inference from Auth-Z policies if they were uniformly used, right? That's the who's allowed to use me paradigm. It's a little complicated. People find it hard to understand. But that it's not clear that there's one pattern that solves everybody's problem either. So it might not be a thing that's ready yet for standardization either. In small meshes, it tends not to matter a lot. It tends to only matter for really big things. But that was one thing that was definitely mesh specific. John, were there other things that we thought were exclusive to mesh besides kind of the dependency management part in the API
I don't think
service?
so. I mean, we need to figure out like some pieces, like how do we bind this route to the mesh and what does that mean? And
yeah, there's a mechanical bits, right?
Yes, but not API necessarily. I mean, we may add like a mesh API as the thing that you bind to, but it's not really a policy. It's mechanical at the second.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I agree that's one of the like mesh specific cases, and we would very much be interested from console side in like contributing to figuring out how to design something like that that works across mesh implementations.
So the other thing I put on the agenda for this call was looking through the way SMI works. There's a bunch of maintainers, and there's also an interesting paragraph that says if people haven't been active for a period, then they stop being maintainers, and unless everyone sort of agreed to continue. So the logic behind that was if we're looking to do something like this and consolidate around the Gateway API, who needs to sign off on it? And is the group of people here representative enough? Other people who may have differing opinions who aren't in this situation, there's still active maintainers that we need to socialize this with. If, for example, we were trying to get directional agreement for an announcement in the next week.
So that is a really great question. And I think if we kind of take the chart editor perspective, you know, the sort of the active maintainer thing is kind of declared in there. I think you know, Keith did a great piece of work around sort of socializing intent and kind of setting some scenes around what we want to try and achieve. And I think personally, I would love to see like a sort of this to back up the announcement, because as I said, like, you know, the key thing for me is the kind of the backing and the standardization of a specification, because that's what's good for the community, and more weight that goes into that, the better it is. So I'm wondering, and Bridget, maybe you can kind of help answer this, but maybe we could do something like, how do we, you know, I don't even have a clue around from a CNCF perspective. How would we go about? Do we have to do a poll? Do we have to, is there a process, or could we just kind of get away with a poll in the SMI maintainers in Slack, and then if you don't reply, for a hold your peace kind of approach? I don't know what the kind of the
Do you mean
is.
in terms of changing maintainership?
Well, more so kind of to try and, I think, just get backing around the things that we've talked around to kind of push focus on just sort of all hands towards API gateway and the potential. I mean, well, let's not beat around the bush. The ultimate sort of result is the deprecation of SMI.
Yeah, I think that charter changes, et cetera, definitely require maintainer buy-in. So if we want to make sure we true up the maintainer list according to who is actually active, that is something that we can start doing. I think that might be hard to accomplish in the next week, just because we need to, you know, do some amount of outreach, et cetera. Maybe let's let's back up a little bit and make sure we're meeting the goals that Craig and company have, which is, it sounds like everyone's pretty much in agreement around the traffic related, considerations. So maybe statements in that space of support are our first step.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that feels fair to me. I think that that sounds good, Bridget, of like starting the process.
Yeah.
Definitely like not getting that done within a week, but maybe like what is reasonable to happen in conjunction with the Gateway API is just like the statement of these are organizations or representatives that are interested in expanding the scope of that without direct reference to like, and SMI is going away or anything like that at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like just the general, like,
Yeah.
I don't think that it's appropriate at this time yet to have like, and here is the draft proposal for what this is going to look like, but more just like a statement of intent for expanding the scope.
Yeah. I'm also, maybe I'm not the only one whose calendar is filling up with colleagues out of office messages already, but it's like, I'm kind of, I don't necessarily want to surprise everyone when they come back from their American holiday with like, hey, everything has changed around you. Sorry, not sorry. We didn't give you any time whatsoever during a holiday. It's like,
I agree with that in general. The one thing, maybe what we might want to do, Bridget, is get a survey together of some of these top line questions, right, that have come up, and get both maintainers and I guess relevant external parties to kind of get their opinions down, and then we kind of do a. It's always hard to get everybody in a meeting like this, right?
Oh, absolutely. I love the idea of starting a survey. And I also love the idea of making sure that the SMI's community focused on making sure to support Gateway API is out there. Like that all sounds great. So.
One thing I would also say is, I don't think this matters for the marketing blog post announcement types thing, but from a technical standpoint, if we can convince Linkerd or Cilium or someone else or both to get involved, I think that'd be useful, because looking around, everyone here is an Envoy-based sidecar mesh. So having some different implementations, I think will keep us honest. So I know we reached out to them, but if anyone has more direct access that can make sure they're involved.
Well, Cilium is also Envoy-based, John, right?
Yeah, but it's at least not a sidecar. So you get Linkerd.
Liz is commenting in the doc actively.
Yeah, Liz came to the last call, didn't she, Keith?
Yes, Liz was here last week, and she's been active in the doc around some of the Cilium implementations, keeping us honest, which is what we want, of course. And so I think they, to quote Liz from last week, she said that they're very interested, Cilium's interested in both SMI and Gateway API. They're interested in being involved here so that they know what to build as far as their support. So I think that's something that they're going to, definitely want to be a part of moving forward.
Yeah. I believe Tim Hawken and Thomas Graff had a conversation about this. I think Thomas is directionally aligned with what was discussed here, but I can go and confirm with Tim, and he can chat with Liz. Tim, well, I'll let that chain work its thing out. But yeah, I think they'll be well aligned from everything that I've heard. I even had a conversation with William from Linkerd while I was at KubeCon, and he seemed fine in principle. It was more kind of a an engineering cost question for him rather than a this is a bad standard, don't do it kind of thing. So I think William can probably be, or the Linkerd folks will probably be on board. I don't.
Yeah.
Because I was asking him about usage, and I think their customers pretty much use their API today. exclusively or almost exclusively. That they don't have a lot of actual SMI users today, so there wouldn't be a large kind of user deprecation cost to them.
I think, yeah, just adding a little color to that as well. I think in the LinkMD implementation is actually running against Alpha 1, maybe even Alpha 2. So I don't think it's, I could be wrong, but I don't think it's been updated for a while either.
I think that's accurate, Nick. I do want to call out that we're at time, a little overtime, I believe. So don't want to hold anybody. Bridget, did you have any last things you wanted to talk about?
I did, which is, it sounds like from what Louis was saying there, that we very well might want to just drop an agenda item on SIG Network for, I think they're tomorrow. Just because if we're reaching out and having, you know, conversations with Tim, et cetera. I know that, of course, because the 1.25 enhancements deadline got pushed forward a week, everyone's been kind of running around hair on fire with that. But possibly everyone, because the deadline is tomorrow. So I think during SIG Network's meeting tomorrow, we might have some ability to discuss this. I don't know if that's a time slot that works. It's a 9 a.m. Pacific, so it's not horrible.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we can even actually get on the agenda. Just
I go to
considering
SIG Network every other week. I'm pretty sure I can get us on the agenda. I'm not worried
Okay,
about that.
that would be awesome.
I don't typically attend, but happy to join for this conversation. So that sounds good.
Yeah, likewise.
All right, I'll drop it on the agenda and we'll see if we can get a discussion going there as well.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Bridget.
Right.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
All right, thanks everybody.
Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
Lovely to see you all.
Good to meet you all.
Bye.
bye.